Hello, steady Taurus. Have you noticed lately that something in your life feels slightly different, even though you can't point to one obvious change? It can feel like movement beneath soil after a long, dry season. Nothing dramatic above the surface, yet somewhere underneath, the roots have begun responding to water again. What matters today and perhaps over the near future is not one spectacular moment, but a gradual return of movement where life has felt unusually still. There seem to be two sides to it. One connected to money, opportunity, recognition or resources, and another touching something more private within you. One asks what may be returning to your hands. The other asks what your heart may finally be ready to stop carrying. The material side deserves attention because Taurus has a meaningful relationship with value, not simply possessions, but what feels dependable enough to build a life around. Something you invested in, waited for, worked toward, or quietly stopped expecting may deserve another look. This doesn't guarantee a sudden windfall, but unfinished business around value may begin moving again through a delayed conversation, overlooked opportunity, recognition for past effort, or resources becoming available differently than expected. The second movement is quieter and may first appear through your body. An old memory may return unexpectedly, someone's name may cross your mind, or something you once tolerated may suddenly feel heavier. Sometimes healing begins, not when the past disappears, but when you realize you no longer want to organize your present around it. And this is where the deeper Taurus question appears. Asterisk. Are you holding on because something still nourishes you, or because you've grown accustomed to its weight? Asterisk. Familiarity can resemble safety when you've lived beside it long enough. Yet a plant can survive in the same pot for years and still reach the point where its roots need more room. You've probably known seasons when remaining steady required more than anyone around you understood. You kept showing up, tending responsibilities and protecting what mattered while uncertainty moved quietly in the background. The change approaching you doesn't need to erase what you built. It may simply ask you to become more discerning about what deserves to remain within it. So instead of asking whether an enormous miracle is about to arrive, consider a more useful question. Asterisk. What is beginning to move now that wasn't moving before? Notice ordinary evidence of conversation becoming easier, a financial matter resurfacing, an old idea gaining relevance, or your willingness to reconsider something you thought was settled. Small movement can reveal more than dramatic promises. You may also notice symbols such as rich green shades, growing plants, coins, old keys, open windows, or the desire to put your hands into soil and make something tangible. The number *6 can serve as a symbolic thread, reflecting Venusian themes of value, care, harmony, and restoration, rather than functioning as a prediction. Let these images remind you to notice what your own attention is already bringing into focus. If you'd like to mark that intention, leave this affirmation in the comments. *6. I'm making room for what brings real value, peace, and stability into my life. Making room might mean becoming available for an opportunity, releasing an expectation, looking more clearly at your finances, or admitting that something familiar no longer provides the security it once did. Because Taurus, the meaningful shift may not be about recovering your old life exactly as it was. Something can return and still need to be received differently. Money with a new understanding of your worth, an opportunity with stronger boundaries, or an emotional memory that shows you how differently you stand beside the past now. Stability doesn't require everything to remain unchanged. Sometimes it is the deeper root system that allows you to weather change without losing yourself. Astrologically, it makes sense that questions of value sit close to the center of this story. Taurus is traditionally associated with Venus, and Venus speaks to more than romance or beauty. Symbolically, it asks what you value, what you invest yourself in, what nourishes you, and what kind of security can truly support you. Rather than searching for one dramatic planetary event, notice where those Venusian questions are already appearing in your life. Maybe a conversation about money is becoming possible again, or an answer you waited for is taking shape. Perhaps you're reconsidering what your work is worth, what you're willing to accept in a relationship, or how much energy you give to something that rarely gives back. Beneath these different situations lies one question. Asterisk, does this exchange still reflect what I know I am worth? Asterisk, growth for Taurus isn't simply about accumulating more. It is often about creating something dependable enough to remain standing when circumstances change, which means understanding where your resources are going. Money is one resource, but so are your time, attention, patience, affection, physical energy, and unseen labor. This makes the idea of a return more interesting. What comes back in the near future may not resemble repayment exactly as you imagined. It could be a better opportunity, a clearer negotiation, recognition for overlooked work, or the chance to make a different decision with resources you once felt powerless around. Sometimes value returns by restoring what was missing, and sometimes by showing you that you no longer have to accept the old terms. Think of a garden after difficult weather. The soil may appear unchanged from above, but underneath, roots can be strengthening and old material breaking down into nourishment before anything visible emerges. That image reflects the double movement here: tangible resources and stability on one side, and the recognition of what you've carried simply because carrying it became familiar on the other. This is why dramatic action isn't necessary. Give yourself a quiet minute and notice what your body does when you think about what you've been waiting for: the payment, conversation, opportunity, relationship, or postponed decision. Where do you soften, and where do you immediately tighten, as though preparing to defend something? There is useful information in that difference. Presence can reveal what urgency hides, especially if you've spent years believing strength means continuing to carry whatever you once agreed to carry. Readiness isn't always a rush of certainty. Sometimes it's the calm realization that you would choose differently now. Perhaps you've experienced moments when nothing visible changed, yet your relationship to something shifted so completely that the old arrangement no longer felt the same. For some, that carries spiritual meaning. For others, it feels like intuition, maturity, prayer, or simply becoming quiet enough to hear what the body already knows. If your faith includes God, you may understand these moments as guidance that doesn't require spectacle. A door may not fly open. You simply notice that the handle turns now. So have you felt something approaching that you can't quite name? Maybe it isn't an event, but the growing awareness that a situation cannot remain exactly as it has been. Recognizing that change allows you to participate in it, instead of waiting for perfect certainty before taking the smallest step. This also honors how much you've already carried, Taurus. You may have remained dependable while answers were delayed or protected, something because you believed patience would eventually make it worthwhile. The deeper question now is whether that patience still serves your values, or whether it has quietly become another form of attachment. That distinction matters when abundance enters the conversation. Meaningful improvement is often less theatrical than a sudden windfall. An overdue matter gets resolved, a negotiation becomes fairer, an expense changes, your work receives recognition, or an opportunity you assumed was gone returns under different conditions. None of these possibilities need to be enormous to change your sense of stability. The Six of Pentacles offers a useful symbolic lens here. It draws attention to giving and receiving, resources moving between people, and whether an exchange has become balanced or uneven. For Taurus, the question becomes practical. Where have you been generous? Where have you been undercompensated? And where might receiving require you to stop minimizing what you contribute? Perhaps you've given time without recognition, performed work whose value was acknowledged too late, or waited on money that remained unresolved longer than expected. One of those threads may deserve renewed attention, not because the universe owes you a predetermined reward, but because unfinished exchanges sometimes return when circumstances, conversations, or boundaries change. A refund, overdue payment, grant, revised offer, returning client, or someone finally honoring a commitment could all express that larger theme. And if something does circle back, notice not only what returns, but how you meet it now. You may be more discerning, more aware of your limits, and less willing to trade peace for the appearance of security. What returns may carry another invitation beneath its practical value, to decide what deserves to be planted again, What needs different conditions to grow, and what can remain in the soil as something new quietly begins taking root. Sometimes the clearest evidence of what you've invested appears much later than expected, Taurus. The star offers a beautiful symbol for that kind of patience, not blind optimism, but hope sustained by continuing to tend what matters even when there is little visible proof of progress. A garden can look empty above ground while its roots are quietly strengthening beneath it. So when we speak about value returning, it doesn't have to mean a dramatic amount of money suddenly appearing. It could be an unexpected deposit, a decision changing in your favor, a former client reaching out, or someone finally honoring an unresolved obligation. The amount matters practically, but so does the recognition behind it. Something you contributed was real, and its value didn't disappear simply because acknowledgement arrived late. You may have told yourself, asterisk, if that money is truly owed to me, I'll deal with it when it comes back. There is wisdom in refusing to let an unresolved financial matter consume your peace, as long as patience doesn't become an excuse to ignore something that deserves follow-up. The healthier balance is staying open while remaining practical enough to send the email, review the paperwork, ask the question, or renegotiate when necessary. This also makes it a useful moment to look at how you're caring for what is already in your hands. Imagine your resources moving through three simple areas: something protected for stability, something directed toward future growth, and something reserved for living and caring for yourself now. The goal isn't a perfect system. It's a relationship with money guided by intention rather than fear. Financial uncertainty rarely stays confined to numbers on a screen. It can settle into your shoulders, shorten your breathing, disturb your sleep, or keep your thoughts circling the same unanswered question. Those sensations don't mean you blocked abundance. They may simply mean uncertainty has been asking too much of your nervous system. When you notice that tension, give yourself a quiet moment and ask, asterisk, if some of this pressure were lifted, what would I want to do differently? Ask. Don't search for the most impressive answer. Notice the most truthful one. Maybe it's saving, resting, paying something down, asking for fair compensation, or simply feeling less afraid when you look at your finances. Money often carries meanings far beyond purchasing power. An overdue payment can represent acknowledgement, a refund can create breathing room, and fair compensation can remind you that your work was never insignificant simply because someone recognized its value late. Sometimes that quiet relief matters almost as much as the number itself. I think of someone who spent months trying to resolve unpaid compensation with a former employer. When the payment eventually arrived, it didn't transform her financial life, but it changed how she held the experience. The obligation was finally resolved, and something that had made her question her own worth received tangible acknowledgement. So Taurus, consider this. Asterisk, if additional financial breathing room appeared today or in the near future, what would you want it to change? Ask, would you spend it, protect part of it, invest in something meaningful, settle an obligation, or simply allow yourself to feel safer? Your answer may reveal how your definition of security has changed. This isn't about preparing for a guaranteed windfall. It's about becoming conscious of how you would receive greater stability if it became available, because you're no longer standing in exactly the same emotional place. Receiving well can mean recognizing value without immediately gripping it from fear that it will disappear again. And this is where the second movement becomes more visible. Healing doesn't always arrive through a conversation or perfectly articulated realization. Sometimes you notice it first as an unexpected sigh, tightness when a memory surfaces, or tears appearing before you found words for them. The body can begin responding before the conscious mind understands what has changed. If someone from your past has appeared in your dreams, an old memory has become unusually vivid, or you felt heavier without knowing why, you don't have to assume you're moving backward. Sometimes an old feeling becomes noticeable because you finally have enough distance to see it differently. What once had to be contained may now be asking to be understood. That is the quieter half of this double return. One side concerns tangible value and greater material breathing room. The other concerns emotional space created when you stop holding an old experience with the same tension. Healing can resemble rain soaking into compacted earth. slowly softening what became hard after going too long without tenderness. The Ace of Cups offers a fitting image here. It is often associated with emotional renewal, openness, and the capacity to feel again. But renewal doesn't always begin with something new entering your life. Sometimes the cup has room to fill only after you acknowledge what you carried and begin discovering what your heart is ready to set down. Forgiveness can become part of that process, Taurus, but perhaps not in the way people often describe it. Real forgiveness doesn't require pretending something didn't hurt, excusing behavior that crossed a line, or reopening a relationship that became unsafe. Sometimes it simply means deciding that an old wound no longer gets to occupy the most valuable ground inside you. That wound could involve a parent, partner, friend, or even an earlier version of yourself, whose choices you still judge harshly. You may have carried the story so long that familiarity has become tangled with identity, yet you can honor what happened without continuing to build your present around the place where it hurt. For Taurus, picture this less as washing the past away and more as working with soil compacted over time. Earth can hold the imprint of every season and still need air and space for its roots to continue growing. Your emotional life can do the same. What happened remains part of your history without determining everything that can grow there next. Give some room to what your heart still carries without forcing confrontation. You don't need to contact anyone, demand an explanation, or manufacture forgiveness before you're ready. Begin with acknowledgement, because naming the weight can help you stop carrying it unconsciously. If it feels useful, sit somewhere quiet and write the name of a person or a chapter of your life that still occupies more emotional space than you want it to. Instead of retelling the story, write one sentence about what you're ready to stop carrying forward. If forgiveness feels too large, simply write, asterisk, I forgive myself for carrying this for as long as I needed to. You don't have to feel instantly lighter afterward. Emotional release is rarely a switch. It's more like loosening soil around compressed roots, so air can reach places that have been closed off. What matters is beginning to relate to the memory differently. This becomes especially important when emotional pain and practical problems are tangled together. Resentment towards someone may coexist with financial responsibilities, old agreements, unanswered messages, or boundaries you avoided because every practical decision brings the emotional history with it. When some of that resentment softens, the problem doesn't magically disappear, but you may gain enough clarity to review the numbers, answer the message, negotiate, or finally say no. That's a more grounded way to understand how emotional healing can affect abundance. Releasing resentment doesn't summon money, and an open heart doesn't guarantee that circumstances will cooperate. But emotional clarity can change your decisions, your boundaries, the opportunities you notice, and the energy you have available for building something healthier. You don't have to repair the past before you're allowed to move forward. You only need to notice where you're still allowing an old experience to hold authority over the person you're becoming. Ask yourself gently, asterisk, who, what, or which version of your story are you ready to set down? Not because it never mattered, but because you no longer want its weight deciding your direction. Asterisk. If you feel comfortable, let your comment become a small marker of that choice. It doesn't need to contain the story or anyone's name. Even asterisk, I'm making room, is enough. You are allowed to release something without explaining it publicly. As that internal space changes, you may notice your surroundings differently too. Nothing is necessarily wrong with your home or routine, yet suddenly something doesn't fit as naturally as before. A chair feels wrong in its corner, a room seems heavier, or morning light reveals how crowded a shelf has quietly become. For Taurus, these sensory observations can be meaningful because your traditional connection with Venus speaks to the relationship between value and lived experience. What you touch, see, use, preserve, and surround yourself with. Comfort matters, but comfort and familiarity aren't always the same thing. An environment can remain familiar long after it stops supporting the person living inside it. You may want to rearrange a room, clear a drawer, replace something worn down, spend more time outdoors, or create a quieter corner where your body can settle. You might even reconsider a larger dream about where or how you want to live. Rather than treating those impulses as proof of a predetermined event, consider them information about how your priorities are changing. This is where the image of a root-bound plant becomes useful. The pot wasn't a mistake. It protected the plant and gave its roots somewhere safe to establish themselves. But eventually, the container that created stability can become too narrow for continued growth, and the answer is simply to give those roots more room. Your surroundings can reveal the same tension between security and expansion. You may not need to move house or reinvent your life. The first meaningful change could be turning your desk toward natural light, clearing old paperwork, changing your bedding, opening a window, or removing one object tied too closely to a chapter you've outgrown. Small physical changes can matter because your nervous system responds to clutter, light, texture, sound, temperature, and space. Even 15 intentional minutes refreshing one corner of your home can create noticeable relief. Earthy greens, warm cream, muted rose, natural wood, clay, or touches of copper can reinforce this Taurus atmosphere, not because they carry guaranteed frequencies, but because they evoke warmth, roundedness, softness, and renewal. Let your environment become less about perfection and more about helping your body recognize, I have room here, I can settle here, I can grow here. And if you want a numerical symbol to carry through this part of the story, *6 fits gently with the Venusian themes of care, harmony, restoration, and value. Think of it as an artistic reminder rather than a prediction or lucky number. Let it return you to one question. Does what surrounds me support the stability I'm trying to create, or am I preserving it simply because it has been here for a long time? If the number 6 has started catching your attention on a receipt, an address, or somewhere in the ordinary rhythm of your day, you can treat it as a personal reminder rather than proof that something specific is destined to happen. Let it bring you back to value, care, restoration, and the kind of stability that still leaves room for growth. Sometimes a symbol matters simply because it helps you notice what your deeper attention has already been circling. One small environmental change can have a surprisingly powerful effect. Clearing a shelf filled with remnants of an old relationship, moving your desk toward natural light, or finally sorting through papers you've avoided can create enough mental and physical space for a decision to feel clearer. It doesn't magically summon an email, conversation, or opportunity, but it can help you recognize what needs your attention when movement appears. Your surroundings are constantly giving your nervous system information, Taurus. Light, clutter, texture, sound, and objects carrying old associations can influence whether your body feels settled or quietly overstimulated. Changing your environment with intention may simply change the conditions in which you think, feel, and make decisions. If you've been restless somewhere that once felt comfortable, ask what that restlessness is trying to reveal. What needs rearranging, not only in your home, but in your schedule, habits, use of energy, or inner dialogue. You don't need to rebuild your life to respond honestly. Maybe the first step is standing in the middle of your room and asking, what here no longer reflects the life I'm trying to build? Look around without immediately judging what you see. You may notice an object tied to an old identity, a neglected corner, unfinished responsibilities, or simply a room asking for fresh air and daylight. Change rarely needs thunder to announce itself. Sometimes it begins when you open a window, clear one drawer, move a piece of furniture, or admit that a routine you've protected for years no longer restores you. The movement may be small, while the recognition underneath it is significant. And Taurus, steadiness doesn't mean preserving every arrangement simply because it once worked. A tree can be deeply rooted and still respond to changing light, weather, and available water. Your stability can work the same way, strong enough to adapt without abandoning everything you've built. Some periods of change don't ask for a leap. They ask you to notice which small decision has been waiting quietly for you and to become more honest about what nourishes you, what drains you, and what you maintain simply because changing it feels uncertain. Writing down what you want, saying, I'm ready to make room, or taking a few slower breaths before a decision can interrupt an old automatic pattern, You don't have to force the next chapter into existence. You can participate by responding to choices already within reach, answering a message you've avoided, reviewing an opportunity carefully, organizing your finances, protecting your time, or putting words around a boundary. Readiness often becomes visible through behavior before it feels like certainty. That is why an affirmation can still have value without controlling what happens next. When you say, asterisk, I open the door to what brings real value into my life, you're giving language to a standard you want your choices to reflect. The words become meaningful when your actions begin agreeing with them. Think less about dominoes and more about tending a piece of ground. You water one area, loosen compacted soil somewhere else, remove what crowds the roots, and return later to see what needs attention next. Caring for your body, checking your accounts instead of avoiding them, or showing yourself compassion for something you could no longer carry, can gradually create a steadier foundation. Momentum often develops this quietly. What once felt immovable becomes more manageable because you're no longer trying to solve everything in one emotional burst. One clear choice creates room for another, and slowly your life begins reflecting decisions made from awareness rather than constant bracing. Someone once told me about a simple practice she adopted during a stressful period. Before drinking her first glass of water each morning, she paused and acknowledged one thing she appreciated. And over time, she noticed that she began her days calmer and more focused. When a job opportunity later appeared after months of searching, she didn't believe the ritual had produced it. What mattered was that she felt steadier and better prepared to respond. That distinction matters, Taurus. Receiving isn't about convincing the universe to reward perfect thoughts. Sometimes it's about becoming less consumed by fear so you can recognize what is available, evaluate it clearly, and decide whether it belongs in the life you're building. Presence cannot guarantee an outcome, but it can change the way you meet one. If you want to participate rather than simply listen, leave an affirmation that reflects what you're genuinely ready to practice. You might write, asterisk, I'm making room, asterisk. 6. I welcome what brings real value, peace, and stability into my life. Asterisk. Let the words become a quiet commitment to how you intend to meet whatever begins moving next. More importantly, Taurus, remember that you are not standing outside your own life waiting for someone else to decide when you can move forward. You don't need to be chosen, rescued, or transformed into a more deserving version of yourself. Your participation begins in ordinary moments when you notice what is changing and choose how you want to meet it. Being receptive doesn't mean sitting still and hoping circumstances arrange themselves around you. It could mean recognizing an opportunity, asking for fair compensation, responding to an overdue conversation, or reconsidering something you once believed you had to keep. You can remain open without becoming passive and grounded without refusing movement. So ask yourself, are you available for something better if it arrives differently from the way you imagined? Ask. Financial movement might come through a new negotiation rather than the exact payment you expected, while emotional relief might begin with a boundary rather than reconciliation. What matters is whether you have enough space to recognize value when it takes an unfamiliar form. You don't have to solve every insecurity or heal every old wound first. Sometimes readiness sounds much quieter, asterisk. I'm here. I'm paying attention. I'm willing to respond differently. Like turning an old key and discovering the lock moves more easily than before, one small action can reveal possibilities that were difficult to see while you were bracing against the door. There is no midnight threshold you need to reach, and no single date that decides when your life can change. What matters today and in the near future is whether you notice where something previously stuck is becoming more workable. It might be a financial matter, resurfacing, an opportunity returning under different conditions, a conversation becoming possible, or greater clarity about what you no longer want to carry emotionally. The key isn't forcing yourself to attract the correct outcome. It's becoming more conscious of what you protect, pursue, accept, and release. Your relationship with security becomes stronger when it grows from discernment rather than fear of losing whatever is familiar. You've already practiced patience in ways others may never fully understand. You've tended responsibilities when results were slow, remained dependable through uncertainty, and sometimes given more time or emotional labor than anyone acknowledged. Those experiences can build resilience, but they can also reveal where patience stops being devotion and begins becoming self-abandonment. A plant doesn't prove its strength by remaining forever in soil that can no longer nourish it. Its roots search for what supports continued growth, and your strength works much the same way. It isn't measured only by how much you can endure, but by how honestly you recognize when the conditions around you need to change. So give yourself a few questions to live with. Asterisk, if greater stability were becoming possible, how would you behave differently today? Ask, what would change in the way you manage your resources, protect your time, speak about yourself, or respond when someone crosses a boundary? Then go deeper. Ask, what are you ready to forgive without pretending it never mattered? What deserves a yes from you now, and what has waited too long for an honest no? Asterisk. What part of yourself have you kept quiet while waiting for circumstances to feel safe enough to reclaim it? These questions aren't asking you to reinvent yourself overnight. They're asking whether the person you're becoming needs different conditions from the person who built your current routines. The old pot may have served the plant beautifully and still become too small for the roots that exist now. Your next movement can remain simple. Honor what your body tells you. Speak more clearly where you've withheld the truth. Review practical details you've avoided, and choose one manageable action that better reflects what you value. Sustainable change is rarely one enormous leap. It's a series of decisions you can continue living with tomorrow. If you want to anchor that intention, take one slower breath and notice what feels most true. You might write, asterisk, I'm ready to make room. I welcome what brings real value into my life, asterisk, or asterisk 6, I choose peace, stability, and growth. Let the affirmation describe how you intend to participate, rather than predict what the future owes you. And remember, hope doesn't have to mean waiting. It can become embodied through checking the account, answering the email, clearing the room, resting when your body asks, protecting a boundary, or allowing an old expectation to loosen. Each choice places your hands back on the life you're actually building. What returns may still surprise you, Taurus, but perhaps the deeper question is whether it still belongs in the future you're creating. Can you receive its value without rebuilding the conditions that once made you feel stuck? Beneath familiar ground, the roots are still moving, quietly searching for where there is room to grow next.